And we are live. Welcome. I am Brian Johnson, your host. Welcome to Bridges to the Bible, trying to understand the Bible in its original context. This is just going to be a short introduction to Bridges to the Bible. It's also a short introduction for me to doing a Facebook Live event. So we'll see how this goes. So welcome. I am glad that you could be here. So we're going to look at the context of the Bible. Why the context of the Bible, though? Why is that important to understand? Well, the thing is, does this mean that, if you don't understand the Bible, that if you don't understand these things, that therefore your salvation is in jeopardy? You're going to get something wrong. You're not going to make it to heaven or what? I'm not saying anything like that. The Bible itself is sufficient for understanding salvation. And if you don't know the saving work of Jesus and his great grace that he pours out so lavishly upon us, we'd love to talk to you more about him. But that's not where we're going. Rather, understanding the context of the Bible helps us, prevents us from misapplying the Bible. It's very easy to take the Bible out of context. It's easy to take really anything out of context and twist it and apply it in the way we want it to, what we want it to say. So that's what we're going to look at here. And I just want to look at a few basic principles for understanding the biblical context, the world of the Bible. Would love if you're joining us here to, just do a shout out in the chat. Also, at the end, after we're done, if you want to stick around, I'll answer a few questions if anyone wants to post any questions in the chat area too. So the bridges to the Bible, the context, the world of the Bible. It probably doesn't come as a great surprise to you, but the biblical world is not our world. It's thousands of miles away and thousands of years ago. Looks very different than our world. And while the biblical world is made up of people like you and me, they had things they had to deal with, positive and negative, but how their lives went was drastically different. What was that world like? So I want to look at some of the context of the Bible here. So why context? So something to keep in mind as we do this. The biblical world, the Bible wasn't written to us. It was written to them. Sometimes we tend to think that the Bible is written specifically to me. And there are times when it really does feel like, and God certainly has spoken to me through his Holy Spirit saying, as I've read something like, ooh, this applies directly to me. This is something I can relate to. But the original authors did not write it to me. It was written for me. And there is a subtle difference between that. And just to understand that there is a difference. So as we approach this, we've got a few main questions we want to ask. First off, what did it mean to the original audience? And then second, after we understand that, we want to ask, how do we apply it to ourselves today? So frequently we miss that first step, and we simply want to read something and apply it and say, okay, well, therefore this means this, and this is what I'm going to do about it. But that's not the way it's intended to be read, and I think in the best case. We need to understand what it means to them, and then once we understand them, then say, what about us? How can I apply that in my circumstance, which may be different, but try to translate it over. So I'm going to have these contexts, these bridges to bridge their world to our world. And there are 5 that I've picked out. And you could pick out some more too that are more minor, but these are kind of the big 5. The geographical, the historical, the cultural, the linguistic, and the literary. So what I'm going to do in the few minutes we have remaining is just go through these 5, try to explain what they are, common questions to ask, and then just give a real short example for each of them. So let's just go through this list in this order. Geographical first. Ask questions like, where did this happen? What is that place like? The terrain, the climate, what, traveling distances, just these sort of things about location. When we look at this, we can look at, for instance, the book of Joshua. And the people of Israel are crossing the Jordan River. So here's a map. Maps, atlases are a great resource for this. My favorite is to actually go to these places and see them for myself. But maps and atlases, it's a great way to look at them. So if you look at this, you can see crossing from the east to the west. They're going to hit Jericho up there. Here's a picture of the Jordan River in that vicinity. And the Jordan River today does not flow nearly as much as it did back in biblical times. In terms of modern agriculture and sucking the water off to be used. So lower today than then, but still. The Jordan River, not a major world-class river by any means. But we read in Joshua about the river stopped flowing and they could walk across on dry ground. Fast forward a few centuries to the book of 1 Kings, and you have Elijah and Elisha also crossing the Jordan River, and not just crossing it, but splitting it and dividing it and crossing on dry ground once again. There is a connection that's being made by the location, and it specifically says by Jericho. There's a location that's connecting to. Then go forward to the time of Jesus and John the Baptist. John the Baptist is baptizing in the Jordan River. And not only that, the places that he's baptizing are places linked with Elijah, like this one near Jericho. And this is where Jesus is baptized as he enters the Jordan River. And why is John the Baptist baptizing in places like this? He's making a connection to Elijah. Just as Elijah was there, John the Baptist is like Elijah, is what the text says. And so there's a location link that's happening there. Little geographical example. All right, historical context. This is more of a when sort of question. So if the geographical is a where, this is a when. When did this happen? Connecting it with the location, what happened in this location? When you read about a location, what sort of connotations are there? If I mentioned Gettysburg and I took a visit there, there's a connotation to that town, not necessarily what is there today, but what happened there. This is a significant historical event. Who are the characters involved? Are these people mentioned outside of the Bible, perhaps? And also just what is happening in the general world at this historical period. And if I said, well, once upon a time, there was a man, okay, who lived in Paris. Okay, I've got an image of Paris. What does that look like? And the year was 1942. Oh, well, that changes the story than if I said it was 2002. Drastically different story, understanding what is happening in the world when the story takes place. So when we open the pages of the Bible and we read in Luke 2 that Caesar Augustus issues a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. Well, who's Caesar Augustus? Well, he's the Roman emperor. He's the one in charge of the Roman Empire. And his dad, his adopted father, Julius Caesar, was deified. And Augustus's coins said he is the Son of God. What does that say when people are calling Jesus the Son of God? There's this setting there that influences what the gospel writers are saying. This isn't just some random phrase. Them's is fighting words. So, history, it matters. Next, the cultural context. Questions like, well, what is life like? What did these people believe, whether a religious context or something else? Just how did they understand that the world worked? What are their manners and customs? What did they typically do? What did they value? I think this in many ways is a trickier thing to understand and something that is the easiest to misunderstand and read into it. If a location you don't know what it is, then you just miss it. With culture, you might completely take it a different way. Something that one culture treats as an insult is another one that treats as a blessing, and you will get a very different feel then. An example: there's a term in the Bible. There's a term in that culture called a Beit Av, which is Hebrew for the house of the Father. And house being not merely the physical building, although it does include that, but also the family as well. It's a father's house. Now understand this was a patriarchal society. Dad is in charge. The chief patriarch is in charge of the entire household. And when his son is going to get married, he doesn't go and build a house somewhere else, or he and his bride move into a home. No, she comes and lives with the family. She joins the family. And as part of that, they build on a new room. They add on to the family house. So when we look in John 14, Jesus says, in my Father's house, in my Beit Av, there are many rooms. He's using that image, this marriage image of bringing his bride home to dad and her coming and living and moving in with him. He's using common imagery of that culture. Now, one thing that's influenced us, unfortunately, the King James translates this word rooms as mansions. And so we've got this imagery of, up in heaven, there's a great mansion for me that I'll live in, this great big house. Well, no, it's one house that we've got separate rooms, dwelling areas. Well, why did they translate it as mansion then? Well, it's an old English word, manse, which means house. The English word changed. And that unfortunately has influenced us in our theology down to this day. So words change even within our own language, which leads me really to the next example, the linguistic context. The question is, what does it say in the original language? The Bible was not written in English, sorry to say. Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. If you don't understand those, you're dependent on English translations. Now, bless God for wonderful translators that we've had down the years. Translations are very good. The best way you can understand without going back to the original is to actually have multiple translations in front of you and compare and contrast. And you'll get a richer flavor for what the original means. But if you do go back to the original, looking at definitions of words, looking at where else a word is used, or where a word is first used, is very helpful for understanding what it means. Every translation is an interpretation. And there's only so much that you can bring from those original languages into our language. It's not a one-to-one thing. You have to make choices, you have to make trade-offs. And they do the best they can, but some things are just lost in translation. Here's one quick example. The word Shema in Hebrew. It means to hear or to listen. It also means to obey. If you said, hey, you aren't listening to me, it's not simply the auditory part. It's the action you're expecting when you say, go do this. There's an obedience factor. So that's the Hebrew word Shema has this whole range of meaning. And many words in Hebrew have a large range of meaning to them. It's a very rich language in a sense, because there's very few words, that there's a lot of doing double duty or triple or quadruple or more. But it makes for a very rich and interesting language of what's going on there. Finally, the literary context. This is a question of genre. We read poetry different than we read a narrative. And the way you understand them and interpret them is different. So when you're reading it, you need to keep that in mind. Look for patterns, the way words are used. That you can be saying something earlier that's going to get translated later, that's going to translate on later and reused. Look at the context of a passage within the chapter, within the book, the flow of it, allusions or idioms that are being used. I mean, one question that I've gotten before is, do you take the Bible literally? My answer is, well, it depends. Did the original author intend for this to be interpreted literally? If I read in the Bible that it was raining cats and dogs, do I have to interpret this as it was literally raining cats and dogs? Or is it an idiom that's just raining really hard? A great resource to use for understanding the flow of a book of the Bible is at the Bible Project, BibleProject.com. This is one example for the book of Genesis. As you can see, the book of Genesis has two major sections to it. The first 11 chapters and then chapters 12 through 50. And this just provides a great flow for the entire book to understand kind of the general context of it. So this is just one example. You can go to BibleProject.com and download one of these for every book of the Bible. They've actually got a lot of great resources there. You should check them out. All right, so those are the bridges to the Bible. The geographical, historical, cultural, linguistic, and literary. 5 major categories of ways of approaching the Bible. So I hope this has been useful for you, that these are some questions that you can ask as you read your Bible. And I hope that you'll read it responsibly, that God will bless you and speak to you through his word. All right, and just a couple things then. So this has just been an introduction to the bridges of the Bible. Next week, same time, we're going to look at Psalm 23 in context. We're going to look at these, just try to take most of these bridges, ask many of these questions of this beautiful psalm, and see what else is going on there. Maybe that was understood in its original context that maybe we miss by not being there. So I'd love for you to come, love to have you. Also, just a little note that I have a weekly blog at bridgestothebible.com. And I've been going through the book of Jeremiah, posting every Sunday evening. The next one for Jeremiah 19 will be up shortly. And so you can get some more of these bridges to the Bible weekly from there as well. Especially I've been looking at the literary context. So just looking at the linguistic, looking at some Hebrew words, and I've got some great ones coming up this evening, actually, in fact. So thank you for coming. Now I'm going to turn it over to a few questions if you'd like to stick around. Let's see here what we've got. Let's see if we've got any questions here. Glad to see everyone reaching out and saying hi. Yeah, we lost the audio during the Genesis image. I'm not sure what happened there. Definitely something to. That's why I'm testing these things out. Let's see here. Oh, don't see any questions. All right. Well, thanks again for coming, everybody. And I hope you'll come back and join me next week. Feel free to share the event with your friends and tell other people about it. Lech Shalom, go in peace.